Why is this question worth asking at all? Well, think about it this way. We've been searching for extraterrestrial intelligence for decades now. Scientists are pointing radio telescopes at the sky, listening for signals from civilizations we've never met. We've even sent messages ourselves, intentionally broadcasting our location into space. So we've already asked the cosmic question, is anybody out there? And if the answer is yes, if somehow we actually detected an alien civilization or they detected us, what then? Here's the thing that fascinates me. The consequences would be almost completely unpredictable. And not unpredictable in the way that the weather is unpredictable. I mean fundamentally, systematically unpredictable. Because we're not just dealing with a new scientific discovery. We're dealing with something that would transform every single aspect of human civilization simultaneously. Let me think about what an actual first contact might look like, because our assumptions about this matter enormously. When scientists talk about it seriously, and they do, by the way, this is real research. They usually imagine something like a radio signal, a distant signal from another civilization, much less dramatic than what you see in the movies, but infinitely more probable. Maybe we detect an artificial signal coming from another star system. Maybe astronomers notice something strange in the atmosphere of an exoplanet, chemical signatures that couldn't possibly be natural, some kind of technosignature. That's the word they use. Now, when I think about that scenario, here's what strikes me. The first thing that would happen is verification. Scientists wouldn't just accept a signal and announce it to the world immediately. They'd verify it. Different observatories would check. They'd look for natural explanations first. Because you have to be careful. You can't go on television and say, ladies and gentlemen, we've discovered alien life, if you're not absolutely certain. The embarrassment would be catastrophic. But here's where it gets interesting. Let's say it's real. Let's say the signal is genuine. What happens next? Well, officially, there's a protocol. The SETI Institute has something called the Declaration of Principles. They've thought about this. The signal gets verified, the discovery gets reported to the government, and eventually, the news goes public. But you see, and this is where my skepticism starts creeping in, the protocol says that's how it should go. The protocol isn't legally binding on nation states. Nations, we have, right here on Earth, different governments with different interests, and we're talking about the biggest discovery in human history. You think every nation is going to cooperate? You think the government that receives the signal first is going to wait for international consensus? Think about what's really at stake here. If we receive a message from an alien civilization, and that message contains any kind of technological information, any kind of knowledge about how their physics works, how their chemistry works, how their engineering works, then you have, in your hands, a strategic advantage unlike anything we've ever seen. A technological advantage that could be worth, literally, the dominance of your entire civilization. So the first cost of alien contact might be right here on Earth. Political chaos. Nations competing frantically to control the communication channel. To be the ones who can decode the message first. To be the ones who understand what the aliens are trying to tell us. You might have espionage, sabotage, conflict between governments, maybe even wars fought over control of that information. But let's set that aside for a moment. Let's assume somehow we manage to actually cooperate. Let's assume we translate the message. What does it say? This is where you have to think carefully about what we're really dealing with. If an alien civilization contacted us, if they reached out across the vast distances of space, they're not going to be the same as us. Not culturally, not biologically, not in their way of thinking. They've had a completely different evolutionary history. They've developed under completely different environmental conditions. Maybe their planet has different gravity. Maybe their sun is a different color. Maybe they evolved in an aquatic environment, not on land. But here's the crucial part. If they can reach us, if they have the technology to contact Earth across the distances between stars, they're almost certainly more advanced than we are. Much more advanced. And here's what that means. An advanced civilization has had more time than us. They've had more technological progress. They've accumulated knowledge for thousands of years, maybe millions of years more than we have. Now, what happens when a technologically advanced civilization contacts a less advanced one? What's the historical pattern here on Earth? The Europeans contacting the indigenous peoples of the Americas. What was the result? Disease, death, collapse of civilizations, exploitation, cultural destruction. Now, The Europeans weren't intentionally trying to wipe out the Native Americans with disease. It was an unintended consequence. But it happened anyway. The Europeans' germs were fatal to people who had no immunity to them. So apply that thinking to aliens. Even if they come in peace, even if their intentions are benign, even if they want to help us, the mere contact could be devastating. What if their presence, their technology, the information they share with us, what if that fundamentally disrupts our society? What if it causes our economy to collapse? What if it creates such a profound cultural shock that our civilization destabilizes? There's something else that historians and sociologists talk about. It's called cardocults. After World War II, when soldiers left some of the Pacific Islands, certain indigenous groups had this strange reaction. They'd never seen the kind of technology the soldiers had: the planes, the radios, the manufactured goods. When the soldiers left, these indigenous people started building wooden replicas of airstrips and radio towers. They believed that if they recreated the symbols of the technology, the gods would bring the goods back. Why am I telling you this? Because it illustrates something profound about the human mind. When you encounter something so far beyond your technological understanding, you can't comprehend it. You can't understand what you're looking at. And that incomprehension can lead to bizarre behavior, to magical thinking, to cult-like movements. Now scale that up. Scale that to the entire human species. We receive information from an alien civilization. That information might be so advanced, so fundamentally different from what we understand about physics and chemistry and biology, that we simply can't comprehend it. We're in our technological infancy. We've only known about quantum mechanics for a century. We've only had computers for about 70 years. And now we're going to receive information from beings who might have been doing this for millions of years. Think about what's in that information. They might have figured out how to tap into stellar energy sources. They might have solved problems of energy production that we can't even imagine. They might have figured out how to extend their lifespans, how to manipulate matter at scales we've never attempted. They might have artificial intelligence that's so advanced it's practically indistinguishable from magic. And here's the problem. If one nation gets that information, or one corporation, or one group of people, they now have power that no one else on Earth has. They have an advantage so complete that they could potentially dominate everyone else. The global balance of power would shift overnight. Catastrophically, you might have wars fought over control of that information. You might have nations threatening each other. You might have the whole planet destabilizing. And this is assuming the alien civilization is benevolent. This is assuming they're not trying to cause problems. But let me ask you a different question. Why would an advanced alien civilization contact us at all? Why would they reveal themselves? There's this idea in the scientific literature called the dark forest hypothesis. It's based on a game theory concept. The idea is this: imagine the universe as a dark forest. Every civilization is a hunter in that forest. They can't see each other. They can only hear the occasional sound. And in a dark forest, what do you do when you hear something? You stay silent. You hide. Because if you reveal your position, you don't know if what you're facing is a friend or an enemy. You don't know if they're more powerful or less powerful than you. And if they're more powerful, revealing yourself could mean extinction. So the logic goes, any rational civilization would stay silent. They'd hide. They'd conceal their existence. Because the risk of revealing yourself and encountering someone hostile is greater than any potential benefit from contact. And if this logic is right, if this is why we haven't heard from aliens yet, then if an alien civilization did contact us, it might mean they're so far advanced that they don't care about the risk. Or it might mean they're desperate. They might be in trouble. They might be sending out signals as a final cry for help. There's actually a scientist named David Kipping at Columbia University who's thought about this. He came up with something called the escation hypothesis. The idea is that the first alien civilization we detect will probably be one in decline, one that's dying, one that's sending out incredibly loud signals because they're panicking, because they're at the end of their civilization. That's why we detect them. Not because they're a typical, normal, healthy civilization, but because they're rare, extreme, anomalous, like a supernova. Supernovae are the brightest things in the sky, but they're also among the rarest astronomical events. You see them not because they're common, but because they're so bright when they do happen. So think about this. Imagine we receive a signal. Scientists verify it. It's real. But the civilization sending it, they might be in their final days. They might be sending everything they know, all their scientific knowledge, all their technological understanding, in this desperate broadcast, knowing they're about to cease to exist. What would we do with that information? How would receiving the last words of a dying civilization affect us? And here's something I find genuinely troubling. Even the detection itself, before we know anything about who sent it, could destabilize human society. Humans are capable of wild, unpredictable reactions to events. People create meaning where there is none. They see patterns that aren't there. When something unprecedented happens, something that challenges our fundamental assumptions about reality, people react in unpredictable ways. We have a historical example. Remember the Hale-Bopp comet? In 1997, there was speculation that an alien spacecraft was following it. Members of the Heaven's Gate cult, they responded to this belief by committing mass suicide. They thought aliens would pick them up and take them to a higher plane of existence. Now, the comet was real. The spacecraft wasn't. But the mere possibility of alien contact, the speculation about it, was enough to drive dozens of people to kill themselves. Imagine if the confirmation of alien contact actually happened. Imagine what kind of psychological effects that could have on populations worldwide. Some people would be thrilled. Some would be terrified. Some would turn to religion, seeing aliens as either agents of God or demons. Some would turn to conspiracy thinking, convinced that the government was hiding the truth about the aliens. You'd have different groups creating wildly different narratives about what it all means. And these different narratives could drive different political movements, different conflicts. There's another cost I haven't mentioned yet, and it's economic. This is something that people don't always think about, but it's crucial. Let's say the alien civilization has the capacity to manufacture things. Let's say they can produce energy using technology far beyond our understanding. Let's say they can create materials with properties we can't achieve. What happens to human industries? What happens to oil companies if aliens show up with unlimited clean energy? What happens to manufacturing if they can produce goods we can't compete with? This isn't just theoretical. Throughout human history, technological disruption has caused economic upheaval. The Industrial Revolution threw millions of people out of work. The internet disrupted communications, retail, entertainment, journalism. But those disruptions happened gradually. They happened over decades. We had time to adapt, even if the adaptation was painful. But if aliens arrived with technology, the disruption wouldn't be gradual. It would be instantaneous. Industries would become obsolete overnight. Economic systems that took centuries to develop could collapse. Currencies might become meaningless. The value systems that underpin our entire civilization could be thrown into chaos. And this is the thing about economic disruption. It doesn't just affect the economy. It affects politics. It affects social stability. When people lose their livelihoods, when they lose their sense of economic security, they become desperate. Desperate people do unpredictable things. They vote for extremists. They support violence. They create instability. So here's the scenario. Aliens arrive, or we detect an alien civilization, or we receive alien technology somehow. Within weeks or months, multiple industries collapse. Millions of people are unemployed. Economic systems are in freefall. Governments are competing with each other to control the technology. You have political instability worldwide. In some countries, you might have actual conflict. And nobody planned for this. Nobody was prepared for it. Because even though scientists have thought about it, even though some protocols exist, there's no coordinated global plan for handling alien contact. Every nation would react independently. Every nation would prioritize its own interests. Let me ask you something else. What if the aliens aren't trying to contact us at all? What if they're just here? What if a spacecraft arrives, not carrying a message, but carrying beings? This changes everything. Because now you're not dealing with an intellectual problem that requires interpretation and understanding. You're dealing with a presence, a physical, undeniable reality that you have to respond to immediately. You have a spacecraft in near-Earth space, or maybe it lands. You don't know what they want. You don't know if they're hostile. You don't know what they're capable of. And unlike a radio signal, which you can study and analyze and take your time understanding, a physical presence demands an immediate response. Some nations would probably try to communicate. Some would probably try to defend themselves. Some would probably try to capture alien technology. And you'd have all of these different responses happening simultaneously, without coordination, without planning. The risk of conflict would be enormous. Not necessarily conflict between humans and aliens, although that's possible, but conflict between human nations trying to figure out how to respond to the aliens. And here's what's really important about this scenario. An alien civilization advanced enough to reach Earth would almost certainly be advanced enough to destroy human civilization with minimal effort. This isn't speculation. This is something that physicists and military strategists have thought about carefully. If they wanted to destroy us, they could probably do it without much risk to themselves. They have technology we can't defend against because they've had millennia of technological development ahead of us. So the only thing that would prevent them from destroying us is their choice not to. Their choice not to see us as a threat. Their choice to let us live. And that's a terrifying position to be in. Your survival would depend entirely on the benevolence of another civilization. Your fate would be in their hands. Now, I mentioned earlier that there's been some speculation that an advanced civilization might choose not to contact us. Not because they don't know about us, but because they think it's better for us to develop naturally, without interference. This is called the zoo hypothesis. The idea is that there's some kind of cosmic zoo, and advanced civilizations have agreed to let less advanced ones develop on their own. If this is true, if advanced civilizations are deliberately avoiding contact to let less developed species evolve naturally, then what happens if we accidentally make contact? What if we're the ones who initiate it? What if we send a signal that reaches an advanced civilization and they respond? What if we break the rules of the zoo? We don't know how they'd react. They might be angry. They might shut us down. They might view us as a contamination to be eliminated. This is the thing that keeps me thinking about this problem. There are so many unknowns, so many ways that this could go wrong. But let me talk about something more fundamental, something about the human reaction to knowledge itself. One of the biggest costs of alien contact, maybe the biggest cost, is psychological and philosophical. For the first time in human history, we would have definitive proof that life exists beyond Earth. We would know, without any doubt, that we're not alone in the universe. Now, this might seem like a good thing, and in many ways, it is. It would be extraordinary. It would be the biggest discovery in human history. It would fundamentally change our understanding of life and our place in the cosmos. But it would also be deeply unsettling for many people. For centuries, humans have thought of ourselves as special. We're the crown of creation. We're the most intelligent beings in the universe. And suddenly, we're not. Suddenly, there are other intelligences out there, and they're probably smarter than us. They're probably more advanced than us. They might be looking at us the way we look at insects. This kind of shift in perspective, it's huge. It's called a Copernican shift. Just like when Copernicus showed that Earth wasn't at the center of the universe, the discovery of alien life would show that humanity isn't at the center of the universe either. We're just one civilization among potentially billions. And this would have religious and philosophical implications. Many religious traditions teach that humanity is unique, that we're created in God's image, that we have a special purpose in the universe. How do those belief systems adapt to the discovery of alien intelligence? Some would adapt easily. Some would struggle. Some people might lose faith entirely. You could have religious movements form around this discovery. You could have some people treating aliens as gods, some treating them as demons, some creating entirely new religions based on the fact of alien existence. And here's the thing about religion and culture. They're not trivial. They don't just matter to individuals. They matter to society. They affect how people vote, how they organize themselves, how they relate to each other. Major shifts in religious and cultural beliefs can cause enormous social upheaval. So one cost of alien contact is the fundamental restructuring of human meaning-making, of how we understand ourselves and our place in the universe. And that restructuring could be painful. It could be destabilizing. Let me try to summarize what I'm really saying here, because I realize I've covered a lot of ground. The impossible cost of alien arrival isn't one thing. It's not just economic. It's not just political. It's not just technological. It's all of these things simultaneously, interconnected, amplifying each other. You have geopolitical conflict emerging from competition for control of alien knowledge. You have economic disruption from advanced technology making human industries obsolete. You have psychological and cultural shock from the fundamental realization that we're not alone. You have the enormous uncertainty about what the aliens want, whether they're benevolent, whether they see us as a threat, or just as a curiosity. And the thing about these costs is that they're not avoidable. They would happen regardless of what we do. Because we can't choose whether to have the psychological reaction. We can't choose whether the aliens arrive. We can't choose what their intentions are. We can only choose how we prepare for this eventuality. And right now, we're not preparing very well. There's no coordinated global plan for alien contact. There's no agreement between nations about how to respond. There's no psychological preparation of the public for the implications of discovering extraterrestrial life. We have protocols for detecting radio signals, but those protocols have no legal binding force. They're essentially suggestions. If alien contact actually happened, we'd be making it up as we go along. And that scares me, because we're not very good at making it up as we go along on big, important things. We tend to panic. We tend to prioritize short-term national or individual interests over long-term collective interests. We tend to be tribalistic. But I also want to say this. The fact that this would be difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't try to contact aliens. The fact that this would be costly doesn't mean we should hide from the universe. Because there's another possibility that I haven't emphasized enough. The possibility that contact with an advanced civilization would also bring benefits. Maybe they could teach us things. Maybe they could help us solve problems we can't solve ourselves. Maybe they could help us with energy production, or medicine, or understanding the nature of consciousness. Throughout human history, when cultures have exchanged ideas and technologies, there have been negative consequences, yes, but there have also been positive ones. We use Arabic numerals today because of contact with Islamic civilization. We have mathematics that was developed by many different cultures. We have art and music and literature that have been enriched by contact and exchange between different peoples. So the same forces that could destabilize human civilization could also transform it in positive ways. The same technological disruption that could cause economic chaos could also create abundance. The same cultural shock that could cause psychological distress could also broaden our horizons and challenge us to grow. The cost is real, but so is the potential benefit. And this is why I think it's important to think carefully about this problem, even though it seems like pure speculation. Because even though the probability of contact might be low, the consequences are so high that we need to think about it. We need to prepare as best we can. We need to have real conversations about how humanity would respond to alien contact. We need to think about the international legal frameworks that might be necessary. We need to think about how to communicate with an alien intelligence. We need to think about how to prepare the public psychologically for this possibility. And most of all, we need to recognize that this isn't just a scientific problem. It's a social problem, an economic problem, a political problem, a philosophical problem. And it's going to require input from people in all of these fields to think through properly. The impossible cost of alien arrival is that it would change everything. And we have to be willing to think about that seriously, to grapple with it, even if it makes us uncomfortable. Because if and when the cosmic phone rings, as they say, we better be ready to answer. And we better have some idea of what we're going to say.